Welcome to the WPI final presentations for the 2023 project experience here on the island. The projects here actually started in 2008 with a trial run. In 2009, they evaluated. In 2010, it's been running continuously with the strong support of the community, as we all know. Today, you're going to hear from 5 teams, 20 students about their final project work. I suppose I should introduce myself. I'm Professor Fred Luke, one of the co-advisors. That's Professor Susan Jarvis, my colleague and co-advisor. If you have questions, there'll be a period after each presentation, a little bit of time for questions and answers. But in general, we have to stick to the 20-minute rule for the presentations because there's a lot of people online that are coming in and out to watch their kids or their, who they sponsored and so forth. So with that, I will introduce the first team, which I think is the erosion team. Correct? So, you want to come on up? Don't be shy. We will introduce themselves, their sponsors, and so forth. So thank you for coming. And for the people that are online, thank you for watching. Here it is.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We all really appreciate it. It means a lot to us that you come out to see our projects today. We are the Coastal Erosion Mitigation on Nantucket team. Our sponsors were the Nantucket Civic League and the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. My name is Ryan Waters.
I'm Thomas Cox.
I'm Michael Sturck.
And I'm Pierre Genetis.
To start off, we're going to discuss erosion. Erosion is the natural process of soil, rock, and sand being worn away by natural processes like wind and water. Coastal regions have been impacted by erosion much more than other regions due to their soft geological makeup and their constant exposure to high winds and high tides. This is extremely present in island communities such as Nantucket, who are surrounded by the issue. Nantucket in particular is the result of a glacial moraine, which is a deposit left behind by glacial movements that deposited sand and debris. It does not have bedrock underneath it, so it erodes very quickly. This has only been exacerbated by climate change. Climate change has led to sea level rise due to the ice caps and glaciers melting, as well as temperatures causing the water to expand. This has caused erosion to take a much greater impact on coastlines globally. It is estimated that on Nantucket, $3.4 billion in damages could be done by 2070 if nothing is to be done about the erosion. This is due to 2,300 buildings being at risk of constant coastal flooding and coastal erosion. This includes essential businesses such as the ferry terminals for Highline and Steamship, as well as the Salem Street Stop and Shop.
So there are a few erosion mitigation methods that our team looked at. The first one is vegetation. This is where plants are planted on the slopes of the dune. This helps to secure the slope as the roots will go into the sand and help to keep it in place. Also helps to catch some of the sand being blown around by the wind. Fencing is where pieces of wood are put in front of the dunes. This helps to catch sand when it's blown around by the wind, and also keep people off of the slopes. Beach nourishment is where sand is brought in and put on the beach. This helps to mimic the beach itself and helps to bring the beach to a state of before some of the erosion. Regrading is where the slope of the bluff is degraded a little, so that beach nourishment or vegetation can be planted and help secure the slope. And then retreat is where buildings and houses are moved away from the bluffs a little, so they are able to not collapse over the bluff. And lastly, we also can use monitoring, whereas we watch the erosion and see if we can do anything about it before heading to the other methods we have. So the overall goal of our project was to evaluate the use of various photo capturing technologies to document land, analyze coastal erosion, and inform erosion mitigation methods for the 4 locations, which are Dionysus Beach, Nantucket Beach Parking Lot, Cisco Beach, and Coffage Park, and add these to Nantucket's Coastal Resilience Plan. These were completed by our 4 objectives. Our first, which is to utilize handheld photography, drone photography, and photogrammetry to visually document coastal erosion at the 4 locations. The second objective is to identify changes in coastal erosion at the 4 locations. The third objective is to compare the handheld photography, drone photography, and photogrammetry for evaluating erosion. And the last objective is to propose coastal erosion mitigation strategies for the 4 locations to hopefully add to the Nantucket Coastal Resilience Plan.
So as listed with our first objective, our plan is to go through and was to use photography with handheld cameras, along with drone photography and photogrammetry to capture pictures of these different coastal areas. Photogrammetry is the process of using software to convert a series of images of a location into a 3D model of the location so that it can be viewed from different angles. We also went through and used the Massachusetts Oceanic Resource Information System, or MORIS, to look at satellite imagery as well as predicted coastline data. This also includes historical data as well as data up to 2021 for current day photography from satellites. And this allowed us to go through and to be able to analyze rates and change of erosion, as well as be able to figure out what the rates were for future predictions. We went through and we used all of this to be able to analyze the locations to see what the erosion levels there were and what different recommendations and proposed mitigation methods would work best for those locations. So to start off, we have some of our examples of handheld photography taken at the 4 locations. Within these, you can go through and see some sand fencing as well as some vegetation and the effects of coastal erosion that has occurred here. Next, we have examples of drone photography. These are taken at different locations than the ones analyzed due to time issues with the project and how long it takes to analyze the different locations. But here you're able to go through and see these nice wide aerial shots of some sand fencing and other vegetation at the locations. Next, we have examples of the photogrammetry. Right here, we have Dionysus Beach. Now, the photogrammetry, we've gone through and we've chosen to render out a video from this specific angle and moving the camera around. But within the software that is used for viewing these, you can choose what angle you want to look at them and see them in a live view as well. We go through and detail out how to do that at the end in an appendix of our research paper. We also go through and we have a thing of Sconset Beach. This goes through and also is able to show the different elevation differences that are occurring on Sconset Beach. We also show in the bottom left how you can go through and get closer angles. This ends up being very useful because in 5 to 10 years, you can still pull up these files and choose what angles you want to look at them from, which is something you can't do with traditional photography where the photos can't be changed after being taken. So we went through and we completed a comparison table of these different technologies. We went through and found, as stated a bit earlier, that handheld photography is really good for close-up detailed photos of coastal erosion areas. We also went through and want to note that smartphones now have built-in cameras, which means that this is a very accessible option for being able to get very easy and quick documentation of coastal erosion in areas. The issue, though, is that as it's handheld, you must be on foot to be able to capture these images, which restricts to what places you'd be able to get the photography from. Drone photography is the next level up, which allows you to go through and get wide aerial shots, as well as being able to remove that on-foot restriction. The drone aerial photos that we showed earlier were taken over the water. You wouldn't be able to normally do that on foot. They also have the slight problem, though, of you need a specific license to be able to fly drones in public airspace, as well as there is a detail limit for drones based on expenses, because for a drone to carry the same quality of camera, it needs to be more robust than you would normally be able to carry. Photogrammetry allows us to then move into the scene elevation differences because it is a 3D model, so it has those advantages over the other two, which are just a strict 2D image. However, for the photogrammetry to be created, you need to use specialized software, which requires certain hardware requirements of the computer producing the photogrammetry model.
as well as you need specific software to be able to view that model further. Here we have one of the results from using that Morris system that we mentioned earlier. This is an example of satellite imagery of, sorry, we'll go through a look. Nantucket Beach parking lot, sorry. From 2014 and 2021, we went through and used the built-in measuring tools to determine that roughly 40 feet of erosion have occurred. And you can even visually see how far back the coastline has gone through and moved towards the houses and the parking lot itself between those two times.
So we surveyed 4 locations as previously mentioned by Michael. These locations were Diana's Beach, Nantucket Beach parking lot, Codfish Park, and Cisco Beach. The first of these locations is Diana's Beach. This is in the northern section of the island. It has relatively flat beaches with larger dunes further back. There was predictions from the Morris system, as previously mentioned by Michael, that predict from 2021 predictions that by 2023, 110 feet of shoreline may be lost from the current shoreline distance. And by 2100, an additional 700 feet may be lost. Our first of these recommendations that we made based on our findings were to install sand fencing at Diana's Beach. This would allow for the sand and the dunes to be further protected, and for the sand to further accrete. This would also help to protect vegetation, which was our second recommendation, and this would help to keep the dunes in place using the roots of the plants. Our next recommendation would be to monitor the beach further for a better understanding of the erosion occurring there. And finally, our last recommendation would be to regrade the dunes to allow for a better angle and for better erosion occurring there. Our next location we surveyed was the Nantucket Beach parking lot. This location is in the southwestern section of the island and has the parking lot has a 3-foot drop currently. The Morris system predicts that by 2030, 300 feet of the shoreline may be lost, and by 2100, an additional 1,700 feet may be lost. Our first of our recommendations is to monitor this beach further, as this would allow for a better understanding of the erosion occurring there. And next, to retreat and relocate the parking lot and some of the other buildings there, as this would allow for the beach to erode more naturally and protect the parking lot and the buildings that are currently there. And finally would be to install fencing, as this would allow to protect the dunes on the beach and prevent any further damage to the parking lot and the buildings. Our next surveyed location was Cisco Beach. This is also in the southwestern section of the island. The Morris system predicts that by 2030, 200 feet of shoreline may be lost, and by 2100, an additional 1,100 feet may be lost. Our first of our recommendations would be to install vegetation, as this would help to stabilize the dunes there. And our second recommendation would be to use sand fencing to protect both the vegetation and the dunes. And finally, to monitor the beach further for a better understanding of the erosion occurring there. And our final surveyed location was Codfish Park. This location is in the eastern section of the island and is part of Siasconset Beach. There is also a fairly large cliff there that has houses on the top that are in immediate danger of falling if nothing was done. The Morris system predicts that by 2030, 60 feet of shoreline may be lost, and an additional 500 feet may be lost by 2100. Our first recommendation, based on our findings, would be to retreat and allow the buildings to be moved to prevent any further damage to both the shoreline, the homes there, and to prevent any pollution that may occur. Our next recommendation, we should use beach nourishment, as this would help to build up the dunes and the cliffside and would prevent we have more time for the homes to be retreated. And finally, our last recommendation would be to monitor to further allow for more time and understanding of the erosion currently occurring there.
In terms of the timelines for each of these projects, we estimate that a vegetation project will take 3 to 12 months to complete, depending on the size of the area that you're trying to cover. And it would take around 1 to 2 years for the plants to become fully established. for a sand fencing project, we estimate it'll take about the same amount of time. It would just be the installation depending on how large the area you're trying to cover is. Beach nourishment can take as little as 2 months to complete, but saying that we are on an island and we would have to import mass amounts of sand, it would probably take closer to a year to complete. Regrading could take as little as 1 week to complete, as it is just a bulldozer plowing through dunes. And retreating can take years and millions of dollars to complete, and it depends on the availability of properly suited land and the willingness of the property owners. Our final recommendations are to complete photogrammetry frequently. We recommend this because photogrammetry gives our best understanding of coastal erosion, and we believe that it can be an extremely useful tool 5 or 10 years down the line. Our second is to capture more data. Getting more data provides for more thorough analysis, and we didn't have time in this project to complete as much data capturing as we would have liked to. Third, use multiple photo capturing methods. As Michael said earlier, each of the photo capturing methods has benefits and detriments, and each of them can be extremely useful to use to provide data for further erosion projects. And lastly, we believe that erosion mitigation should be prioritized at Codfish Park and Nantucket Beach. Codfish Park's very steep, almost 70-foot cliff face in some places is a threat to public safety and a threat to the environment, and should be treated more immediately than the other locations. And Nantucket Beach has the highest rate of erosion that we looked at of the 4 beaches. And we believe that creating projects that allow for accretion at this location is extremely pertinent. Lastly, we would like to acknowledge the people who helped us with this project. Our great sponsors, Deanne Atherton, Bruce Balkin, and Peter Morrison. Our amazing professors, Fred Luft and Susan Jarvis. We would like to give special thanks to Vince Murphy and Leah Hill from the Nantucket Natural Resources Department, who helped us a lot with this project. We would also like to thank Jacob Tinkhauser for providing the photogrammetry scans. And with that, we would like to open the room up to questions. All right, if you could just go up to the mic.
It will help if you can come to the mic. If you cannot, I will try to repeat the questions for the online audience.
First of all, congratulations. That was a great piece of work. Also extremely alarming. With the modeling, and you used this phrase,
Photogrammetry.
Thank you. Can it factor in the different mitigation techniques as a function of being able to slow it down? So let's say and then could you then model the cost per foot that this is going to save over time? So if we were to put in fencing, there would be a cost associated with that. But then you could then, with the modeling, tell us that's going to slow it down by a certain percentage.
Yes, so the photogrammetry process is where you go through and we take photos of existing locations in their current states, and we're able to create a 3D model of how it currently looks based on those photos. So being able to make prediction data based off the photogrammetry would be possible, and being able to determine based on what mitigation method is used there could also be possible. However, this would have to be done through regular predictionary methods. Photogrammetry would simply just enable being able to go through and better see if a cliff face is becoming more horizontal or vertical, and then being able to see those different elevation and changes, which wouldn't be as easily possible with the other methods that aren't photogrammetry, since it's creating a 3D model of existing space.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Am I on? I don't think so. No, okay. So the question is, I'm thinking along the North Shore of Diana's Beach and going down. The question is, can the role of architecture in either improving, causing erosion or saving it? And I'm going to give a specific example without mentioning too much. Further down on that shore, most of the houses sit up on the dune, big structure. You can look out over the sea and, you know, grand views. There are some properties where the houses are sitting low on the dunes, or even in back of the dunes. Dunes are building up in front of those houses. And so, you know, the role of architecture in kind of either making things worse or better. I mean, I know you only had a short window of time to explore the whole world, but any thoughts on that in terms of you know, how that fits into your proposals? Thank you.
Yeah, we believe that the role of architecture is more of a precautionary one in the way that people building structures should be aware of the erosion that occurs, especially on beachfront properties, and should consider how their property can impact the environment around them, especially with places where there are higher dunes. You know, we would hate for a property to have to either fall into the ocean or be relocated. It can take millions of dollars to relocate a home, and it could take even more to clean up a house that fell onto the beach.
Gentlemen, well done. This was a wonderful presentation. Two things. First, if you felt like it, I would encourage you to share your photogrammetry with the Natural Resources Department. That would be terrific. I'd appreciate that where I work. And then second, the recommendations you have and the ways that they work. Have you looked at any of the legal implications of how your recommendations might be brought to bear, how you could implement them in a legal way? Thank you. Well done.
Yes, so to touch on both of those, at the very final appendix of our paper, we give download links to be able to get the photogrammetry files yourself. We also provide a link to the software that we personally use to view the photogrammetry files. We also have created a tutorial video on how to use that software to use those exact files to be able to view the photogrammetry. We also provide some videos which are higher quality versions of what we have shown in this presentation to be able to see rotation around the photogrammetry files if your computer cannot handle the software itself. And to go through and touch on the different locations, we did not, as part of our analysis, conclude different legal implications or methods based on how legislature or bureaucracy would go through and tie into our methods suggested. We simply viewed it from a perspective of we were able to make these analyses based on the technologies we looked at, and then using that and our knowledge from background research and current research with mitigation methods, proposing what could be possible there and timelines of how long it takes once a project is greenlit.
Hi, thanks for your work. I just had a quick question on, in your recommendations where you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Are those the order in which you recommend them happening, or is it just your recommendations?
Yeah, that is the hierarchy of how we believe they should be implemented. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, are there any other questions in the room? Great, then I'd like to thank our coastal erosion team, and we'll set up for the next presentation. Okay. All right, so we're gonna give a little pause to keep with the printed schedule, which has our next presentation starting at 1:30. So we'll give it another minute or two for people to who might be interested to arrive or to tune in.
Later, if you have people who want to start shouting in the audience, we have a while. So you always have to hit the button to begin.
Great, Greg, you have a wireless.
Oh, even better. Peter suggested that I tell you about the project program. We have about 55 centers around the world. And maybe about 10 of them are domestic. And they include, of course, Nantucket, Washington, Santa Fe, and a few other locations. And then the rest are international. And the international ones are everywhere from pretty much every continent. This is the 29th time I have personally been off campus to advise projects. And in the spring, I will be in Worcester, UK, advising. And then I was informed I'll be in Thessalonica, Greece the year after that. And then who knows? There's probably about 120 to 140 faculty that advise at those centers. It changes every year a little bit, depending on who's available. But WPI has been running these centers, if you want to call it that, since 1970, and is pretty much the only engineering school that runs the volume. A couple of years ago, I looked at how many students go abroad from from Worcester Polytech, and it's about 1,300 students a year. And maybe about 5 years ago, the second closest school, engineering school, sent 75. So you can go by comparison. And the reason it works is because we have a quarter system, not a semester. So you can spend 7 to 8 weeks somewhere rather than, say, 16 weeks or 14 weeks. And it's a pretty effective program. It's nationally recognized. And this is one of my favorite centers.
All right, so unlike Fred, I'm a newbie. This is only my 4th project center, so, but it is a great experience for both the faculty and the students. Our next group is sponsored by the Nantucket Health and Human Services Department, and they are going to talk about a Nantucket Youth Behavioral Health Assessment. Go ahead.
There we go. Okay. So today we're going to talk to you about the Nantucket Youth Behavioral Health Assessment. We did our project in partnership with the Nantucket Youth the Nantucket Health and Human Services Department and our wonderful sponsor, Jericho Mealy. We also want to briefly acknowledge the Nantucket Contract Review Committee, who first identified the need for additional research in this area and helped to bring this project into existence.
My name is Simeon Hoffler Jr.
My name is Mary Lawrence.
My name's Alicia McLean.
And my name's Miles St. Jean.
So what is mental health? So according to the World Health Organization, mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community.
So you might be wondering, why is a project like this on Nantucket? Well, there's minimal data on the behavioral health of the youth community on Nantucket, as there hasn't been a COVID-19, as there hasn't been a behavioral health assessment since COVID-19. And in order for HHS to effectively and efficiently provide their services to the students, they need to know which type of demographics in the communities require funding for programs, and what types of problems are in the schools. So by doing this, creating a survey that's specific to Nantucket will allow HHS to go more in depth with the types of questions they ask in the survey, which will allow them to identify the exact types of problems that are happening which within each demographic and community on Nantucket. The project goal is to design a data-driven survey that the Health and Human Service Department of Nantucket can use to track the mental health needs of the youth community on Nantucket.
To help us achieve this goal, we outlined the following objectives. First, to identify factors such as social or cultural that contribute to the student's sense of belonging. To identify barriers that impede the student's willingness to use current mental health resources available in their schools and communities. To document the impact that the COVID pandemic had on students' mental health and academic performance. And to assess how the students' involvement or lack of involvement in their schools and homes impacted their mental health.
To achieve these objectives, we completed the following methodologies. We conducted interviews with youth-oriented professionals that worked in organizations such as Our House, which is an after-school program for students that are teenagers, and Fairwinds, which is Nantucket's Behavioral Health Counseling Center. We also distributed a survey to Worcester Polytechnic Institute undergraduates for the sole purpose of collecting data and supplementing the methodologies used to develop the Nantucket Youth Survey. The Nantucket Youth Survey was distributed by HHS to Cyrus First Middle School, Nantucket New School, and Nantucket High School, though unfortunately we weren't able to receive respondents from Nantucket High School.
And now we move on to some of the results we were able to collect from the Nantucket schools. So to analyze data and make correlations between mental health factors, we've developed a few scoring systems. And the first one is the mental health score. And students were asked to rate from almost always to almost never. How often do you experience feelings of anxiety, depression, and hopelessness? And then these scores were averaged together, and then that determined an individual's mental health score. And similarly, we asked students 3 questions concerning their connection to their schools and peers and communities, such as I can connect with my peers on an emotional level. And they rated these on a Likert scale, and these scores were again averaged between the 3 questions, and then that was used to calculate a student's belonging score, which determines a sense of belonging, with 1 being a poor sense of belonging and 5 being a great sense of belonging. They feel very connected to their peers, friends, and schools. And lastly, we asked 1 question about learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. We asked, was it hard for you to learn virtually during the pandemic? And if a student answered 1, that meant that they thought it was much harder to learn during the pandemic. And if they answered 4, they thought that it was much easier to learn during the pandemic than it was to learn in person.
So the primary purpose of our project was to design a survey. So the limited data analysis that we did conduct was less for the purpose of identifying correlations as it was to test the survey efficacy and to identify areas that needed potential improvement. So for the WPI survey, we received a total of 129 responses. This is a survey that we distributed to WPI undergraduates through clubs, friends, and outlets like that, just as kind of like a guinea pig survey. The average mental health score was 3.2 out of 5. The average belonging score was 4 out of 5. And the average COVID score we found to be 3.2 out of 4. In the right-hand corner, there is a mobile view of the survey, which is hosted on Qualtrics. And this is what it would look like if you were to click on the survey link. So for the Nantucket Youth Survey, we received a total of 204 responses. For this survey, it was made up of 6th to 8th graders and ages 11 to 14. The average mental health score was 3.9 out of 5. The average belonging score was 3.6 out of 5, and the average COVID score was 2.1 out of 4. 200 of those respondents came from the Cyrus Pierce Middle School, and 4 of them were from the Nantucket New School. And like before mentioned, we unfortunately didn't have any high school respondents. Once again, in the right-hand corner, this is a mobile view of the Nantucket Youth Survey. There's the option of choosing between the languages of Portuguese, Spanish, and English.
And so in order to visualize the data that we collected from the Nantucket schools, we've created some graphs to help correlate between mental health factors and the scoring systems. So over on the left-hand side, you'll see the 5-point scale for the mental health and belonging scores. And then on the left, you will see the 4-point scale for the COVID scores. And each colored bar represents the aggregate score for each group, and the numbers on the top of the bars are the number of students who identified with each group. And none of our questions were listed as required, so some of the numbers may be a little bit different for each scoring system. But right now we were looking at ethnicity, and we did not find that this had a strong correlation with mental health. And though some of the groups like Asian or Pacific Islander or Native American did have very high or low scores, they only had a few students, 1 or 2 students, so we could not make any conclusions about those. However, gender did seem to play at least a minor role in the students' mental health, belonging, and COVID scores. And we couldn't say much about the non-binary student population since only 2 students actually identified as non-binary. However, there is a slight downward trend between male and female students for all 3 scores. And academics are always an important thing to measure for students. And we did see a drop in mental health and belonging scores as a student's grades decreased, meaning that they are somewhat correlated. However, we were not able to figure out which factors influence which. So we're unsure if having poor mental health will cause students to achieve lower grades, or if seeing those low grades will negatively impact their mental health, or both. So in order to distinguish this, more concentrated research will have to be conducted. And additionally, there is a trend that students who reported struggling more during the pandemic tended to receive lower grades. And we did find an interesting trend with social media use, mental health, and belonging scores. And overall, more frequent social media use is correlated with lower scores, but students who did not use social media at all did not have the highest scores. And we are hypothesizing that this is because of the social pressure or feeling left out from their fellow peers who use social media. Do keep in mind that these students are of ages 11 to 14, and most social media apps have a minimum age of 13. And we also asked students if they felt that they could talk to their friends if they needed help. And we saw a relatively strong correlation in average scores in that students who did not feel that they could confide in their friends tended to have lower senses of belonging and mental health.
Question we asked the students was whether or not they would use the mental health services offered at their school, where 133 people said no. And in order to understand the reasons why people said no, we asked the question of why would you use these services or not at their schools, where 50 people said no need for reasons such as they don't have any issues in general, or that they already have resources to go to. 31 people said they might feel uncomfortable using their services for reasons such as not trusting the schools knowing personal information about mental health, or they fear the potential consequences of using the resources at their schools.
Moving on to our recommendations for future work in this area. For the sake of survey response rate, it is crucial for students to be able to complete surveys at school rather than having to do it on their own time. We saw a large spike of responses during the window that Cyrus Pierce had scheduled, so it would be beneficial to repeat that in the future. We also recommend that more research be conducted into the behavioral health of students whose identity is underrepresented by a needs assessment of this scale. As we mentioned, we saw a few trends that we just couldn't justify with our data alone due to insufficient sample size. So incorporating another angle of investigation would help gather more information within those demographics. We also recommend that in future surveys, additional questions be added to gather additional information. Asking students about their lives at home could help assess mental health factors in that setting. And asking questions about their academic or professional trajectories could help us get a sense of where students think they're headed in life. And finally, we suggest that more emphasis be placed on advertising and promoting the use of mental health services to anyone who needs them, because just getting a conversation started can do a lot towards reducing stigma and misconceptions. We would like to acknowledge the following people and organizations for helping us with project work. Firstly, for being an excellent sponsor to work with, we would like to thank Jericho Mealy from the HHS. And for helping bring this project into existence, thank you to Joanna Roche and the rest of the CRC. For providing the team with new perspectives during interviews, thank you to Pauline Proch from Our House and Jason Bridges from Fairwinds. And for their consistent guidance and support, thank you to our advisors, Professor Luft and Professor Jarvis. We will take any questions now.
Have the portable mic in addition to the other mic if you want to raise your hand if you think you need the portable mic.
Thank you. That was a phenomenal presentation. Could you just clarify why you didn't get the high school data? It wasn't made available, or you didn't get to survey it? Because it seems that would be so relevant to a study like this. Thank you.
Yeah, so unfortunately, by the time we had received the approval to get the survey out, the time frame from when the survey was distributed and when we had to analyze data and kind of pull our project together wasn't enough time for the high school to either designate time in school for them to take the survey, whereas the Cyrus Pierce Middle School, they had like a designated time frame for all the kids to take the survey, which is why we had such a high turnout. So if in the future there was able to be some type of designated time frame or a class period, then we expect that we would have a pretty large turnout of responses.
Able to elaborate a little bit more on time frame was that you were unable to have cooperation for that turnaround. As a former high school teacher, that largely concerns me.
Sure. So we were here for 7 weeks. So we began our process in the first 2 weeks of kind of reaching out to schools and establishing contact, and just trying to get things like focus groups going, interviews, so that we could actually develop the survey in a way that was based off of the needs in the community and among the students, to kind of tailor it specifically. And then around weeks 3 through 5, I believe, was kind of the time frame that we needed to get things like approval for sending the survey out, have things like consent forms, which the HHS handled, so that students could take the survey, make sure that there weren't any opt-out, and for those who did have opt-out forms, that, you know, there was that kind of process, which took some time. So because there wasn't a specific time frame given to the high school, we didn't have that large turnout, like I said. So I think that couple of weeks, maybe if we'd had like, I don't know, 10 weeks or plus, there would have been more time to, you know, obviously high school teachers are busy and the high school system is really busy, as well as the whole public school system. So yeah.
I also have something to add. So the survey is technically still open, I believe.
Yeah.
And our sponsor has access to the survey itself. So any responses that come in after the fact can still be accessed by the HHS and analyzed. we had to cut data analysis a little bit short so that we could prepare for this presentation and have results to present.
My name is Veronica Bolchik, and I am on the Contract Review Committee and Council for Human Services. So first of all, I want to thank you for your efforts in this extremely important area. And I also want to thank the Nantucket community and our select board and our voters for recognizing this need and helping to support youth behavioral health grants, which have just been awarded, that we basically recognized through anecdotal information that there was a great need. Having a tool like this and the ability to collect data will help moving forth in potential receiving additional funds for programming. And I am extremely sorry that we didn't get data from the high school age group. And we will, carry the torch and use your tool. And, with our last breath, we will get that data. So thank you.
Thank you.
One follow-up question. About how long does it take to complete the survey?
It takes as little as 5 to 15 minutes.
Hello, I'm Pauline Proch from Our Health. I spoke to you on the phone. Thank you so much for this great presentation. I'm really glad to know that the survey is still open. And so if we were able to get more students to participate, would you be in charge of putting together the results, or would that come back to Human Services?
Yeah, so everything in relation to the data and where it will store and be analyzed, that will be passed on to the Health and Human Services Department, specifically our sponsor, Jericho Mealy. So he'll handle everything concerning that going forward.
And you have the resources to be able to put that together? We're going to make it happen. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Another hand. Yeah. The next team is the Soul Smart team, and they will explain what that is and what they did.
Hello, my name is Grace Phillips.
I'm Alana Reed.
I'm Daniel Brower.
And I'm Brendan Feiner.
Our sponsor is Lauren Sinatra of the Nantucket Energy Office, and this is a presentation about Nantucket's path to SoulSmart status. Now, what is SoulSmart? Well, SoulSmart is a national program established by the U.S. Department of Energy that helps communities create accessible paths to putting solar panels onto the roofs and ground around residential and commercial buildings. The program's staff help interested communities streamline their solar processes and become solar energy leaders. About over 500 communities nationwide have been designated with a SoulSmart designation, and they come in 4 varieties: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. Although no community has yet achieved a platinum designation. The other 3 designations are roughly evenly distributed among the 500 communities, and with our help, the town of Nantucket is aiming to achieve a silver designation. The general process for a community to achieve a SolSmart designation is to first approach SolSmart and ask for a preliminary review of the community's solar processes. Then a representative of the town will sign a solar statement indicating the town's commitment to the SolSmart process. Nantucket's solar statement was signed by the town manager. Then once the SolSmart representative receives this solar statement, they will conduct a zoning review, which is a review of all of the town's processes in order to determine which SolSmart criteria the town has already achieved and which they could easily achieve. Now, a criteria is a task that the community can achieve in order to earn a point or some number of points. A community needs a certain number of points in order to earn a certain tier of designation. All criteria come in, they come in two categories: discretionary criteria or prerequisite criteria. All the prerequisites of platinum include the prerequisites of all the lower statuses. The prerequisites of gold include all the prerequisites of lower statuses, etc. So a community reaches a designation tier by earning all of the prerequisite criteria for that tier and lower, as well as sufficient points. So for example, to earn a bronze designation, a community would need to achieve the 3 bronze prerequisites and earn 60 points. Whereas to earn a silver designation, not only must the community be eligible for a bronze designation, they also must complete the 4 silver prerequisites and earn 100 points in total. Going back to the process, once the zoning review is complete, the community will work with their SolSmart technical assistant in order to complete the additional criteria they must complete and verify those criteria with SolSmart. Then, once all of the criteria have been properly verified, SolSmart will award the community a plaque and their designation. We found in the process of researching SolSmart that many communities attempt to achieve a SolSmart designation only after putting in significant effort toward improving their solar processes and becoming a solar energy leader.
Fortunately, Nantucket is a solar leader. Even though it may seem like Nantucket's status as a historic district and its restrictions around what can be constructed would prevent it from having a clear process to install solar, Nantucket has already implemented programs to help facilitate the installation of solar on the island and has completed numerous residential and solar installations. You can see here a few of the over 200 residential solar installations on the island. The Historic District Commission, which oversees every publicly visible construction on the island, wrote these solar guidelines in 2009 to clarify how to install solar without disrupting the historic character of the island. We can see here a map with markers of all of the solar installations on the island to date. When a resident of Nantucket decides to install solar on their home, they can be eligible to up to $6,000 from the local solar rebate program, which is funded by the Nantucket Power Choice program. Since 2017, the local rebate has given back over $500,000 to the community, with eligible installations producing over 1 megawatt of power. Nantucket has also completed a large commercial installation at the Surfside Wastewater Treatment Plant in the summer of 2023. This installation consists of 232 solar panels producing over 100 kilowatts of power, and it is expected to offset over 100 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. You can see here a graph of the new installations of solar per year, which has gone up, which has increased drastically in the current years. With all the work that Nantucket has done towards solar development, they are in a prime position to achieve SolSmart Silver status, so long as they can complete the prerequisite criteria for bronze and silver. As we approached this project, we developed 5 objectives: to determine the requirements for silver status that the town of Nantucket needs to complete, to develop and execute a plan to fulfill the requirements for silver, review and document the town of Nantucket's permitting process for solar installations and identify ways it can be streamlined, update and enhance the town of Nantucket's publicly accessible information related to solar and permitting by creating and revising online resources, recommend a path for Nantucket to achieve SolSmart Gold status in the future. In completing our objectives, we helped the town of Nantucket improve its solar installation process further, work towards obtaining a SolSmart Silver designation, and solidify its status as a solar leader. As of today, we have 165 points. As of today, we have 165 points approved by our technical assistant and are attempting to get an additional 50 points verified. In addition to this, we also still have to complete the silver prerequisite of a solar landing page. But once we have those points verified and that task complete, Nantucket will have 215 points and be eligible for silver status.
So in developing the solar landing page, we had 4 primary tasks. The first was creating an updated frequently asked questions or FAQs page. The second was developing Nantucket's permitting checklist. The third was compiling some bar graphs of relevant solar data. And the fourth was updating the solar map that you guys saw earlier. For the updated FAQ page, through an initial analysis, we found that the FAQ page that was up on the current Nantucket website was lacking in some regards to the questions and the answers that were offered. So we talked to staff members at the Planning and Land Use Department, as well as staff at various solar installers on the island, to compile a list of questions to add to the FAQ page, as well as updating the answers and linking to relevant resources. For the permitting checklist, we developed this checklist, which has all the required permits, permit fees, and other relevant information for a resident to install solar on the island. For these graphs, we compiled data from various Nantucket and Massachusetts resources to determine the number of solar installations on the island. As seen on this graph here to the left, we see the total residential installations from 2007 to current day. And on the right, we see the cumulative increase in the residential capacity. That orange bar there is 2017, the year the local solar rebate program began. And as is clearly seen, the slopes of these graphs skyrocket since then. Here we see again the updated solar map. The 2017 version was uploaded initially, and we were able to compile data and update this map to this current 2023 version.
So now getting into our recommendations and conclusion. Our first recommendation is to complete the silver status. Most of the work is complete. We just have a few remaining tasks. As of today, the town has earned 165 out of the 100 required points for silver. The remaining prerequisites are the staff training and the zoning determination letter, which have been completed and still need to be verified by SolSmart. And the last prerequisite is the solar landing page, which still needs resources uploaded to the town's website before it can be verified by SolSmart. And we plan to have the silver designation by January of 2024. Our second recommendation is to complete the gold prerequisites to further enhance the solar installation process on the island. With the completion of silver, the town will have earned 215 out of the 200 point requirement for gold status, and the town would need to complete the gold prerequisites to earn this. The first being to codify solar by right accessory use in the town zoning ordinance at an annual town meeting. The second, which is the zoning barrier removal, which the town currently has satisfied. And to keep this prerequisite satisfied, the town cannot introduce any barriers in the zoning ordinance, such as visibility guidelines for solar. And the last one is that town staff can guarantee that solar permits are turned around in 3 days' time. And we have a to be determined later for this timeline. Our third is to maintain the solar landing page, in particular the solar map. We have developed a program that will automatically do this from permit data. And so we've left our sponsor with instructions on how to do this, and we recommend that it is quarterly updated. But we also want to highlight that updating the other resources should be updated on the website, including the permitting checklist, the FAQ page, and the bar graphs with the solar installation metrics. Our fourth is to make amendments to the permitting process. Our first recommendation is to digitize the permitting process. Currently on the town website, there is a system in place to do this, but town staff is not looking for this. They're not really trained on how to use it. And so it's still all in paper. And so digitizing the permitting process can also guarantee that 3-day permit around time for the gold prerequisite. And we also want to develop solar-only permits, particularly the Historic District Commission Certificate of Appropriateness and the building. These current permits are large pieces of paper with a lot of information for all construction types on the island. And so if we look at the next slide here, you can see the COA, which has a bunch of information, and highlighted in blue is only what's required for solar. And so we can reduce this half in length, which makes it more clear and intuitive for residents and installers when they're completing this. So lastly, we want to bring back the idea that Nantucket is a solar leader. The island has over 200 residential solar installations, and that number only continues to grow. The Nantucket Energy Office is constantly identifying ways to improve the solar permitting and installation process, and earning a SolSmart Silver designation helps to promote and recognize the work the town has accomplished. Lastly, we want to acknowledge the people and businesses that have helped make this project what it is, particularly our advisors, Professor Fred Luft and Susan Jarvis, our sponsor, Lauren Sinatra, and other businesses. Thank you. Any questions?
We have about 5 minutes for questions, if anybody has any.
Firstly, that was a fantastic presentation, nice piece of work. The question that jumped to mind was, you say where Nantucket is a good solar community. Can you back that up in terms of maybe comparisons to other communities? You know, what you shared with us a bunch of data, but how do we compare to other communities, perhaps in in the Cape area, relevant to perhaps Martha's Vineyard, anything?
Oh, am I not mic'd? Sorry. Oh, that's my bad. We are currently the only location in the Cape area that is attempting to get SolSmart or anything like that.
Thank you.
Additionally, we have 60 points in market development, which is one of the categories of criteria you can earn, which our SolSmart technical assistant said was the most amount of points they had ever seen any community earn in market development. So we have a very strong solar market here on Nantucket.
That's great. And a follow-up question. For communities that have achieved this SolSmart status, obviously they've proved that they've made it easier for solar to develop solar within their communities. Does it bear fruit? Does the actual branding of being SolSmart actually result in more solar going up?
That is an excellent question. SolSmart advertises that this is the case. In our communications with SolSmart designated communities, they seem to report no change, but it is a significant investment for like recognition for the efforts that Nantucket has already completed. In a lot of the ways that SolSmart has advertised itself, it seems to claim that more solar installers may come to your community. However, on Nantucket, given its unique status as a unique historic status and its status as an island, that's unlikely. So the benefits that SolSmart claims it will give to Nantucket are dubious.
Additionally, one of the primary sets of benefits for SolSmart status is the work that the community itself puts into achieving it. It's in a way a goal to adhere to best practices.
Got it. Thank you.
Keep getting the same two people. And this may be a question, it may be unfair. Is there an issue from what your research of talking with the town and stuff between HDC, the Historic District Commission, and our approach to solar? I mean, is this a working relationship that's holding hands, or are they kind of like pushing each other's hands away? I mean,
through our talks with the HDC and HDC representatives, they have constantly reaffirmed that the HDC is pro-solar and pro-working with people to get solar installations. They very rarely reject certificate of appropriate applications, And if there's an issue, they'll often send for revisions instead of outright denying it, because once again, they want to work with people.
And in terms of, obviously, Nantucket relies on cables coming across the water. So, we're always looking at ways to, I guess, conserve. The generation of this power, is it staying on island or does it go back into the grid? And we kind of are always trying to catch more power.
There is actually no feedback for generation that happens on island to the mainland. So the generation on island will stay on island.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, good presentation. Next group is Mariah Mitchell. When we first came to the island, we used to have the students stay at the Mariah Mitchell dormitory, I guess. Now we stay at the yacht club, which is much appreciated.
Okay, our next group is the group that has been working with the Mariah Mitchell Association. And they are going to talk about the Mariah Mitchell Interch Association's interns' impact on science.
Hi, I'm Taylor Fiore.
I am Michael Conroy.
I'm Josh Kesselman.
And as Susan just said, we worked with the Mariah Mitchell Association to assess the impact their former interns had on science, with a special thanks to our sponsor, Joanna Roach.
First of all, let's talk about who Mariah Mitchell was. She was born on the island of Nantucket in 1818, one of 10 kids in a family of Quakers. And because of this, she grew up being educated just like her male siblings were. In 1847, on the roof of the Nantucket Bank, she discovered what's called a telescopic comet. This is a comet you can only see through a telescope. After doing that, she won a gold medal for her research and became the first U.S. female professional astronomer. From there, she moved to become one of the first professors at Vassar College and was a lifelong educator and researcher in astronomy. The current MMA was founded in 1902 to preserve that legacy, with the internship program being started in 1914. They cover the land, sea, and sky of Nantucket and focus on curiosity and hands-on learning. In the present day, the MMA is based in the center of Nantucket. It is the second oldest nonprofit on the island, as well as the oldest scientific organization here. It covers $3 million in annual funding, with 16 buildings, 14 full-time employees, and last year alone, 22,000 visitors.
So before we get into the Mariah Mitchell Association internships, it's important to understand what an internship is in general. So internships are work experiences that are offered to students by organizations for a fixed period of time, generally in the summer. They're experiential learning opportunities, which means that students learn by doing and by reflecting on what they've done. There are many benefits to internships for students, one of which is employability. So internships look great on resumes because they're a way that students can show that they can apply the theory that they learned in the classroom to the real world in a professional environment. In one of the studies that we looked at prior to the project, there was a 14% higher interview rate for students that had internship experience on their resume, and that was regardless of if this internship was actually related to the job they were applying to. So you can just imagine how beneficial it can be when you have relevant internship experience. We also have career decisions. Internships are a great way for students to test out a career in the field that they think they're interested in without committing to a full-time role. So they could realize at the internship that maybe they don't love the career that they think they did, and they could shift for the remainder of their academic career. We also have academics. So internships give a more detailed understanding of the subject at hand, which is generally related to the major that the student has. So when they return back to school, they just have a deeper understanding and more of a knowledge of the subject at hand, which helps them stay more engaged in classes and can also increase their grades.
So to follow up with the Mariah Mitchell's legacy of education, the Mariah Mitchell Association has held internships since 1914. Currently, the internships are distributed between the 6 fields shown here of administration, astronomy, education, historic preservation, marine science, and natural science. And in the summer of 2023, there were 35 positions between these with over 650 applicants. So it can be a competitive program. And why are we actually doing this project? Well, as we stated before, the Mariah Mitchell Association has had in one form or another internships since 1914. However, there's not been a comprehensive record of those interns, but they still want to be able to celebrate and highlight the successes of these interns. So that is where we have come in to assist them.
Yeah, so the goal of our project is to create a database of as many interns that we can find across all fields and across all years. From there, we want to collect data on their experiences after their internship, as well as during their internship, and we can then use that data to assess the impact that they've had on the scientific community. So we've accomplished this goal through 4 objectives. The first is the actual data collection. We wanted to use independent research, surveys, and interviews to actually collect this data on the interns, which will then lead to our second objective, which is the actual creation of the database. This database is being shared with the Mariah Mitchell Association at the conclusion of the project so that they can continue using it for the remainder of the internship program. Our third objective is to write profiles. The point of this was to give a more detailed story of each of the different interns that we found particularly engaging or particularly unique. The internship, we can then show what they've done after their internship in their specific field. Our fourth objective was to design visuals. These are something you'll see later on in the presentation, and also on the back table, there's some examples of these visuals that we've generated. And the idea of these is to give a more broad understanding of the successes of all of the interns across the fields.
The way we did this was by beginning to identify our interns, their names, their internship field, and their year. And we recorded any contacts we could find through online searches and the annual database provided by the Mariah Mitchell Association. We recorded their contacts, including emails, LinkedIn's, and Facebooks, and sent them a survey that was a mixture of quantitative and qualitative data that really looked at their experience during their internship and in their careers thereafter. Lastly, we selected specific participants in the survey to go more in depth on their experience after their internship. So we tailored some questions in an interview format to really understand what they experienced. We ended up identifying 859 interns. We found contacts for 511 of them. We received 190 survey responses and completed 22 interviews. These are our results. So as you can see, this graph shows the interns by their field of internship. Astronomy is the most and administration is the least, which makes sense because astronomy has been running much longer than administration has been provided. However, there is an even distribution of responses across each field, with response rates being just over 30%. This is our interns' responses by the year of their internship. As you can see, with a few outliers, the trend goes up towards 2023. This is for a few reasons. One, more internships are now available in present years than they were in 1958. And secondly, technology has become way more available and accessible for interns. And given our survey was electronic, it would make sense that we have more respondents in the most recent years. This map shows the current locations we found our interns to be at. So we found them to be in 5 countries, including the UK, Germany, Canada, Finland, and the US, with 36 states in the US. There's a heavy concentration in Massachusetts and California, which makes sense because both have large populations and are STEM hotspots, which is what most of the Mariah Mitchell internships are. Lastly, we have a huge concentration in Massachusetts because the Mariah Mitchell Association is located in Nantucket, Mass. So a lot of the interns stay around this area. Part of our survey was to understand how the internship benefits our former interns, and we found that 162 participants said that it helped guide their career decisions thereafter. 169 participants said that they learned valuable skills they were able to use after their internship, and 176 participants said that their overall experience in Nantucket and at the MMA was positive.
as well as how interns felt the internship program impacted their ability to move forward in their careers, we wanted to look at what the interns had actually achieved throughout their careers. So in doing that, we found that 144 of survey respondents had completed research at one point or another in their career. 111 interns have published papers throughout their career, many of which their first publishing was with the Mariah Mitchell Association. And 70 respondents have been awarded prizes for their academic and professional achievements throughout their careers. As well as this, we also found that there were 148 books published by survey respondents. That includes complete authorship, co-authorship, and being featured for a chapter. There were also 39 patents held and 5 TED Talks given by former MMA interns.
Moving beyond the numbers, we wanted to highlight the achievements of some specific interns. One of the earliest iterations of this program was in 1924 when a grant was given to Cecilia Payne-Gapushkin, a researcher at Harvard University. While at Harvard, she published a groundbreaking thesis detailing that stars like our sun were made of hydrogen and helium. She was also the first woman to head a department at Harvard University. In 1964, Nancy Evans came to the MMA and she was researching what are called variable stars. These are stars that appear to twinkle or change their brightness over time. Since then, she's worked on a bunch of different NASA telescopes, including Kepler and Chandra.
Next, we have 1973 intern Bonnie Barati. She was the 2022 recipient of the Kuiper Prize, which is an extremely prestigious award given to only one individual each year for their contributions to planetary science. Currently, she works at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory on the Europa Clipper mission, which in about 6 years will land on Europa, one of Jupiter's largest moons, and just assess the conditions there. We also have 1977 intern John Briggs. He was actually the first male intern to ever come to the Mariah Mitchell Association. While he was at the MMA, he discovered a love for the history of astronomy, and ever since he's been collecting books, telescopes, and other artifacts related to astronomy. He has one of the largest collections in the world and actually opened a museum in New Mexico where he allows the public to walk through and explore his collection.
Next, we have from 2009, Helen Chang. She was an aquarium intern in 2009 and then later returned in 2011 for the more selective Bay Scallop research internship program. She is currently studying at Northeastern University to receive her PhD, where she is studying range expanding species such as black sea bass and blue crabs. And finally, we have John Weaver, intern from 2015. He led the Cosmos 2020 Galaxy Survey, which cataloged the properties and distances of different intergalactic bodies. As well as highlighting different interns, we also wanted to create some recommendations for the Mariah Mitchell Association. First, during the actual internship process, from survey responses, we have recommended that they increase research opportunities throughout the different internship programs other than the mainly research-focused astronomy program into like natural science and marine science fields. We also recommend that there is an increase in the networking and integration between the different internships, both the internship programs at the MMA and also other internships on the island, as well as after the internship process is done each year, continuously updating the database that we have provided to them. So then there is always a comprehensive list of all of the former interns of the program. And with that information, creating different events such as alumni reunions to keep former interns of the program engaged with the MMA.
To briefly recap, the Mariah Mitchell Association was founded to carry on Mariah Mitchell's legacy of curiosity and hands-on learning. And they offer a series of internships each year, which are designed to give students a chance to grow as educators and professionals in their fields. To determine the effects of these internships, we looked at independent research, survey and interview results, and compiled all of that information into a shared database that we provided to the MMA. From that, we created a series of profiles and infographics. The infographics are going to be passed out by some of our advisors after this. And finally, we created recommendations about how to continue the internships program in the future. We'd like to give a special thank you to our advisors, Fred Luft and Susan Jarvis, to everyone at the MMA, including our incredible sponsor, Joanna Roach, and to all of the former interns who made this project possible. Thank you so much. If you'd like to check out our infographics and profiles, those QR codes are active.
Any questions?
some insight as to what sort of postdoctorate or post like college where most of these interns have ended up?
Can we pull the slides back up for a second? Is that possible?
You can start.
We're gonna click there.
them. Here's a recap of our entire presentation. Recap of the recap. There we are.
Yeah, so this is a list of some of the schools that our respondents covered for their PhD program. There's some probably big ones, Harvard on the side, MIT, so some Massachusetts schools, as well as tons of others from across the whole US.
Here's also some current companies that former MMA interns have been working at.
We have a few minutes here. Next group is Linda Loyne. Take your time. But just to keep in sync with people online, we'll take a 3 to 4 minute break here. So just as a humorous thing, Linda Loyne will probably mention something about how their advisor helped them drive some roads. What they may not mention is the fact that I also managed to get him stuck out at Great Point, and they helped me dig out. You got a few minutes. Do you have any questions about the program or us working here on Nantucket? Other than the students who have been. We do not have the actual projects for next year. There's usually a high demand. Dominic Golding, who's actually the coordinator for the Senate, will post some information and ask people about projects. And you got to jump on it because there were a couple people that just said, well, I'll get you one, I'll get you one. And by the time they did, we didn't have any more openings. So if you want a project with us next year, jump on it. So, yeah.
What's the time frame?
Dominic usually comes down in, I'm thinking about this, April, May timeframe before it gets too crazy here, and just goes around and talks to people. And then he solicits projects during the summer, finalizes them during June and July. And then in August, we have them and we give them to the students, because the first quarter of the year is a prep course where they learn sociological interviews and how to do research and things like that. We also teach them how to write, which is their favorite thing. And then they pick a project and they start for 7 weeks and do a prep course. They learn about the projects, interact with the sponsors, learn a little bit about coming down to the island. Then they have a week off between terms and they move down with their advisors. And basically, I kind of tongue in cheek say, figure out where your office is, where the bathroom is, now get to work. And that's the whole idea. Go ahead and start.
All right, thank you. So, we are the Eel Point Road Restoration and Resilience Team. My name is Jonathan Pantojas.
I'm Madison Reiber.
Kelly Pritchard.
And Anthony DeMarco.
And we are sponsored by the Linda Loring Nature Foundation. Might take a couple seconds for the slide to get up.
The Linda Loring Nature Foundation became operational in 2007 with the goal of conservation and research on their 275-acre property. They also host educational programs on this property that are available year-round for all ages. Their property is located on Eel Point Road, which is a private, partially paved road on the northwest end of the island. It's subject to frequent flooding and erosion that alters its shape, worsens its overall condition, and encroaches onto the Linda Loring Nature Foundation property, causing damage. And this flooding and erosion will only become worse with current climate change projections, such as the rise in relative sea level.
So to give you more background on Eel Point Road, we provided a video that we're going to drive you down Eel Point Road, just so if you're unfamiliar with the road. So we're starting just past the Linda Loring Nature Foundation property, and we're heading to 40th Pole Beach. 40th Pole Beach is a popular beach located on Nantucket. Because of that, that makes Eel Point Road heavily traversed in the summer. So as we're driving down, I want to point a few road conditions as we drive. So one is corrugation. Corrugation is also known as washboarding, and these are little rivets in the road. There's a series of them which makes these little washboarding effects, and it causes the vehicle to cause bumps on the road. So that's when you see the little bumpiness effect. And as also I want to point out is the road medians in the middle of the road. The original layout of the road is on the left side, and on the right side are walking paths which have been driven over. And because of this was there's narrow spots on the road, and it causes it hard for vehicles to pass by each other. So now we're heading towards one of those road medians, and we're going to drive on the right. And you can see the road surface is fine, soft sand, which makes it difficult for bike riders to travel on the road. And as we come up to 40th Pole Beach, we're going to head into our goals and objectives. So our goal was to research, identify, and mitigate, and recommend solutions to mitigate the effects of continued flooding and erosion on Eel Point Road in both near and long term.
And so with this goal in mind, we've created a couple of objectives and methods that we want to follow to help us reach this goal. Our first objective was to assess the conditions of Eel Point Road, more specifically the road conditions. And we did this through 3 different outlets. One was for road condition photography, so that we could take photos of the road and show its conditions. One was assessing it through the unsurfaced road condition index, which basically quantifies it basically quantifies just how bad the road is, as well as GIS mapping, which we were able to map out all of the different conditions on the road. Our second objective was to identify the users of the road. And for that, we set up a trail camera and left it on Linda Loring property facing towards the road for 2 weeks. And this way we were able to identify not only how often the road was used, but also what types of vehicles or transportation methods were used, such as biking, walking, etc.
Our third objective was to measure community perceptions towards Eel Point Road and its conditions. We did this through distributing an online survey, which was distributed through the flyer you can see on the screen now, as well as through local news and the Linda Loring Nature Foundation social media and email lists. We also interviewed abutters of the road maintenance experts to get their opinions on the conditions of Eel Point Road. Next, we wanted to assess and document the conditions on Eel Point Road and how these conditions affect the road's usability.
Our fifth objective was to take all the data that we gathered on the road and integrate it into a format that us and the LLNF can analyze in order to move on to our sixth objective, which is to recommend solutions. So by analyzing our integrated data, we were able to recommend solutions to the LLNF to fix Eel Point Road's flooding and erosion.
And so from these objectives and methods, here are the results that we got from different sources like the photography, URCI, trail camera survey, and GPS. The first is road condition photography. Luckily, I was given a camera, Nikon D3300, and I was able to photograph some of the conditions of the road. For example, right here, you can see the crown height of the road. You can tell that the shoulder of the road is much higher than the actual road itself, and this is just from constant years of getting graded over and over again. The second photo is the road height, and as you can see, there's a lot of variance in just how high the road goes. Finally, this last photo that I wanted to point out has actually two conditions that I want to talk about, and that's the road median, which, as Kelly said earlier on, was created from people driving on the walking path and creating a desire path, as well as the flooding. As you can see, some of the potholes are not only very large, but also filled with water, and these typically last for days, sometimes even a week, depending on how big the pothole is and how much rain there was.
And so the Unsurfaced Road Condition Index, known as the URCI, is a method used by the United States military in order to survey roads and determine the severity of specific sections on the road in order to fix it and maintain it to increase usability of those roads. And so we use this system for Eel Point Road. And here is a map in ArcGIS Pro, which shows Eel Point Road sectioned off, where each section is a section of the road with similar surface conditions that we were able to survey. And the map is also color-coded based on severity, as shown with the URCI. And so moving on to the next slide, here we have a zoomed-in section of section 15. And here you can see this section is colored in yellow. And what this indicates is that according to the URCI, it has a rating of good. And so we can then look at the URCI survey data sheet, and you can see it has an overall score of 59 out of 100. And so it should be noted that ideally we want every single section to have a rating of excellent. However, currently no section has a rating of excellent. So therefore, every single section has problems that needs to be addressed in order to increase its usability. And additionally, the worst section on Eel Point Road is section 6. And so in the video, this was the part where we took the detour right, where it has all the fine and loose aggregates. And looking at the URCI data sheet, we can see it has a rating of poor with a score of 39 out of 100. And so if you refer back to the data sheet, you can see the main thing causing this poor score is a combination of an improper cross-section of the road in combination with loose aggregates.
Moving on to our trail camera results, our trail camera collected data on how many vehicles used the road and at what times they used the road. We noticed the largest amount of traffic during daylight hours with a peak traffic at 11 a.m.
Now we move on to our survey results. Our survey was open for a month and we received 160 responses. And first, to gain an understanding of who answered our survey, we have a percentage of the top 3 groups. The first was 47% were year-round Nantucket residents, 28% were seasonal Nantucket residents, and 9% were fishers. And now we look at the ratings on Eel Point Road condition. Over 50% of the survey respondents said that the condition of Eel Point Road was poor to very poor. And now we have the Eel Point Road condition maintenance. 50% of the respondents said that the maintenance of Eel Point Road was poor to very poor.
Looking at the types of transportation people use on Eel Point Road, from both our survey and trail camera data, we found that over 50% of vehicles used on Eel Point Road are passenger vehicles.
Additionally, we utilize the global positioning system, commonly referred to as GPS, and additionally incorporated with ArcGIS Pro, a system we use for GIS mapping. And so here is a map that we utilize to visualize future flooding on Eel Point Road. And so in the bottom left of the map, you can see that's where the LL and F resides. And so the red point on the map, where it's the darkest shade of blue, that's where in 2070, that's the most problematic chance of flooding in the year 2070. And what this tells us is that currently we need to develop solutions and plans in order to implement to this road before the year 2070, most likely way before, hopefully. And so therefore, when we implement these, it will reduce the chance of flooding on this section of the road by 2070. And so, and additionally, we utilize another layer, which is an erosion layer. And so this layer in GIS mapping tells us and told us that the entirety of Eel Point Road has a moderate risk of erosion. And this informs us that whenever a solution must be implemented to Eel Point Road, it has to take into account that there's a higher likelihood that this solution will cause erosion, and therefore each solution must be implemented carefully to ensure such erosion, especially on the banks of the road, do not occur. Additionally, solutions must be implemented possibly as the road continues to have use to directly affect and mitigate erosion factors on the road.
Moving on to the recommendations that we gave to the Linda Loring Nature Foundation to mitigate flooding and erosion on Eel Point Road. We're going to highlight 3 maintenance solutions that we recommended, as well as some of the additional steps. A full list of these recommendations can be found in our report. First, we would recommend that the Linda Loring Nature Foundation regrades Eel Point Road. This involves using the current surface of the road as a base, adding fill material to bring it up in height, especially in those areas where we pointed out entrenchment. And this will also allow the road to be shaped to allow water to move off of its surface. Another solution is a French mattress. These can be installed under the road in areas saturated with water, as many parts of the road border wetlands. These are rocks wrapped in geotextile fabric that disperse water underneath the road surface and prevent it from becoming saturated.
Our last maintenance highlight is geocell installation. This is a material that is a honeycomb-like shaped material, and it helps maintain the structure of the road. So the sand and dirt will stay in the structure, so that prevents erosion. And also it helps there be a place where the water can drain, so it doesn't stand on the top after rainfall, and it's also able to withstand heavy loads.
And so in addition to these 3 highlighted solutions, we also wanted to add a couple of different additional steps that could help with each one. For example, this one is to create a civic association. This is different from a homeowners association because it's not written into the land deed. It is completely voluntary, which makes it a lot easier to set up than a homeowners association. And the big reason why we want to include it is because the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, as well as the land bank, can be included in a civic association as they are abutters of the road. This would create a plan of regular maintenance on the road, and it would also tell each abutter who would pay for the costs and who wouldn't. It wouldn't be split evenly, or well, it could be, but you could also find different solutions to who will pay for more portions of the road. Our second solution, or our second additional step, is to survey the landowners, basically to send out a survey to every abutter and see what possible solutions they know and what possible solutions they could think of and what they want done to the road. And then after that, everybody can vote and see which solutions they actually want to use and go through with.
Our last is placing warning signs in front of these 3 spots on Eel Point Road. The first is the unpaved section of Eel Point Road coming onto the dirt and sand section. And then we have 40th Pole Beach, where the sand is very fine and soft and it's hazardous for bike riders. And the last is ditches, where the road heights become very variable and it's hard to pass as the road becomes very narrow.
We would like to acknowledge a couple of people for their assistance with our project. We would like to acknowledge our advisors, Professor Fred Luft and Professor Susan Jarvis, our sponsors at the Linda Loring Nature Foundation, Catherine Pochman, Dr. Sarah Boyce, and Seth Engelberg, as well as Kristen Bullitt, Libby Buck, Andrew Patnode, Arthur Dwyer, Mike Burns, and the Young's Bike Shop for their assistance with our project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions?
When all else fails, I will ask a question. Going back to the earlier presentation about the erosion on the North Shore, so we were down Dianis, you guys were a little further down. And when you had that map up where Long Pond, essentially where Linda Loring is, from the head of Long Pond to the beach is not very far. And so what's the that's the timeline seemed to not match the first presentation about erosion on that side. How is that dealt with?
So we have other layers on the GIS map, which is not in this presentation, but is actually in the file in a report, and it shows the rate of erosion on that side of the coast. And currently it is, the trend is that most of that side of the coast is just simply not eroding at a fast enough rate to really be of a concern for that area. But the other erosion team, they were looking at areas which has a higher rate of erosion. But here along Eel Point Road, the main risk is simply the rising sea level, creating high risk of flooding in the future, and not the coastal erosion for specifically that section. But up the road more, that will be out of the extent of this project to verify.
Okay, another quick question. In terms of the washboarding, because that is an effect that it's a very common and very natural effect. Can you give a little background? You were able to get any research as to why that does happen on the dirt and sandy roads? Because it's not just here. I mean, it is a phenomenon that occurs routinely and it's somewhat predictable.
Right. So there are two main sources of washboarding, at least on Eel Point Road. The first is vehicle speed. So as vehicles move very quickly on dirt roads, the wheels move up and down, which pushes down on the road surface. And over time that gets amplified as more cars drive over it. Another cause specifically on Eel Point Road is the use of construction equipment. Since their tires are much larger with much deeper ruts in them, that can also cause impressions on the road surface that are then exacerbated.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for this information. Do you have anything about the width of the layout of the road, the legal layout? And can you tell us if the physical road is actually in the layout, or are there parts of it that go outside of that? Thank you.
So unfortunately, since Eel Point Road is private, there wasn't a ton of information available to us regarding its historical layout. We do have two sections where you saw those desire paths where we know it does deviate based on satellite information, but more research would need to be done as to whether its current layout is within those margins.
Hi. I have a question. I answered some of the questions on the survey as an abutter or as a manager of a property on the abutter. And this survey was done in the off season, correct? So one of the key factors on Eel Point Road too is the fact that the land bank, 40th pole, is a public beach, which sees thousands of people and cars. And what impact does that have, having a public beach on the private road and access with that many vehicles going down the road? Do you have any information on that?
We do not. So another highlight that was in our report is that we recommend that the Linda Loring Nature Foundation have another survey during the summer and different parts of the year so that we can get an idea of like also a trail camera and see how many cars frequently use that road.
Hi, I can give some context to that. So our group, I was one of the sponsors. Our group did recommend that we collect additional vehicle usage data on the road throughout the year, and we actually have already implemented that suggestion. We just purchased 3 vehicle counters that we're going to install on the road, and they're going to count the data of cars and bicycles and pedestrians going along the road for the whole year. So we'll have actually more data in 2024 to show overall use in the off season, summer season, et cetera.
Oh,
Really very
make a
quickly.
comment. I'm gonna ask a question.
Okay, I'm gonna just make a comment very quickly. On behalf of, I'm the chair of the CRC, and on behalf of us, we'd like to thank you. We look forward to getting that data from the high school because that is crucial data for us and crucial in the work that we've been trying to do. So we thank all of you that came and did this for us. Also, we're thanking all of you for all the work you did. And what we're asking is that on behalf of the CRC and the town, on the back, we have some refreshments when you're done and a gift for each one of you for your time that you gave to us. So thank you guys very much.
Very generous of you. Thank you. Here's my question. It was pointed out you have a public beach at the end or in the middle of a private road. Is there a possibility in the long term of a new type of partnership between the government and the private entity to help maintain the road or something? Because, I mean, it's pretty clear this town is not responsible for private roads, but they have a public beach there. What can be done?
So there, oh. Yeah.
Just because, I do want to make it clear that the land bank, which is a town entity, does help in the maintenance of that road, right now. It's just whether the flow onto the road and what is having the access to one of the most popular beaches on the island, the impact that has. So the land bank does work with the neighbors and the Linda Loring in in maintenance on the road. The town is the land, and the land bank is part of the town. It's a town entity. Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was.
So yeah, through some of our interviews, we did find that both the land bank and also the Linda Loring Nature Foundation have chipped in to do some regrading on the road. As for government, it is a private road currently. However, there have been cases, while talking to some interviewees, there have been some cases of private roads that have been taken by the government and not exactly turned public, but it could be used maintenance on. And Eel Point Road does have a very good point in that 40th Pole Beach is used a lot by the public. So although it is still a private road, they could possibly make a case that the government could help out and fund certain types of mitigation tactics.
Hi, thank you all for your work. I should probably know this working on Eel Point Road, but are you aware of the ownership? Is there a change in ownership from like public to private where it goes from paved to unpaved, or is it private the whole way? I noticed maybe a year or so ago there was a repaving of the paved section. So I was just kind of curious if there's a difference there.
So Eel Point Road is not only public but also paved up to about, I think it's 71 Eel Point Road. After that point, it is all completely private. While checking GIS maps or some layers on ArcGIS, we've actually found that the Linda Loring Nature Foundation owns some parts of the road, but the rest of the road is actually not owned by any specific parcel.
Last call for questions. All right, thank you very much. I think that went pretty well.
Yeah.
Out of everything that could go wrong, none of it went wrong.
What did you say? A specific unit of
You didn't say a unit of time.
I did not say. I had two questions for you, but that's not.
Those are hard questions on you, right? That was great.
Fine.
I
thought you were.
Well done.
Oh, Anthony, do you have the USB so we can give it to a sponsor? Yeah.